Powerful tropical cyclone is developing in the Coral Sea and it is expected to impact the Queensland coastline sometime later next week. Your latest forecast update brought to you by Force 13 AU for January 19th, 2024. You can see we are tracking two tropical lows across the Australian region right now. There's a tropical low 03U over the Northern Territory, still dumping a lot of rainfall, but the main one is tropical low 05U over the Coral Sea. This one's expected to become a severe tropical cyclone at some point in its life, and it's increasingly more likely that it's going to impact the Queensland coastline somewhere between Townsville and Rockhampton. I'm going to be giving you all the details on its forecast landfall location, its forecast impacts, and what this cyclone is going to be doing over the next 10 days in the next 20 minutes. So stick around for the entire video, and if you are brand new here, please do consider subscribing and also leave a like on the video while you're at it, because it really does help us out. Nationwide, we've got some hot conditions remaining in the nation's west across the Gascoyne and the Pilbara regions of Western Australia. Those rain and storms are only getting heavier up in northern Australia as well, with up to 300 millimetres forecast for some locations today, and that turns to rain for the top end of Queensland. Some of those rain could have embedded thunder showers in it, and then storms and showers for southeastern Queensland along a trough line that's going to be developing associated with the two tropical lows. Showers for western Tasmania, but what's different there? A lot of rainfall expected on the southwestern parts of New Zealand, and hot conditions at the southeastern parts of New Zealand, where daytime maxima could approach 30 degrees Celsius today. Now look at the cyclone picture. We've still got Cyclone Angreck, which is a Category 1 strength tropical cyclone towards the west of the Cocos-Keeling Islands. It's now starting to move out of the Australian area of responsibility, so we'll be dropping that cyclone on our graphics pretty soon. I'm not tracking the tropical low over the Northern Territory at this time. It's a very low chance of development over the next 10 days, and I don't foresee it becoming a tropical cyclone. However, the main story is this storm in the Coral Sea is now an 80% chance of development across the next 5 days. It's expected to become a severe tropical cyclone, and as you can see on the forecast right now, which is very conservative, mind you, it's going to be taking a beeline at the Queensland coastline. Anywhere between Townsville and Rockhampton could be impacted with a potentially severe tropical cyclone in around 7 to 10 days' time. No warnings or watches are current, but as this cyclone intensifies and draws closer to the Queensland coastline, we're likely going to be seeing a lot of warnings and watches upgraded for that area. Now the forecast is very conservative for it right now. It's actually expected by some models to get towards Category 5 status, but I'm conservative because there is still a lot of uncertainty. And as you can see on the Access G3 wind runs for its official designation of Invest 90p, it wraps itself up around next Sunday and into Monday, becomes a tropical cyclone by Monday morning, before it begins rapid intensification on Tuesday and Wednesday, before going into what looks like a stalling pattern Wednesday morning into Wednesday afternoon. And it just kind of hovers over locations around Leehu Reef, Marion Reef, that sort of area, before Thursday and Friday it starts its final approach towards the Queensland coastline, making landfall on top of Townsville at about midday on Friday. That is Australia Day, before moving inland and paralleling the Queensland coastline, re-emerging outside of Bundaberg and becoming a Category 1 cyclone as it heads towards Brizzy. So we'll be watching that forecast closely, because there is variables in there that will change and that will bring significantly worse conditions towards different locations along the Queensland coastline. Now, taking a look at the nationwide picture for rainfall, you can see that other tropical low across the Northern Territory. It dumps a lot of rainfall across the central Northern Territory before moving into Western Australia and bringing a lot of rainfall there as well. I'm going to get into that amount of rainfall that they're expecting. Apart from that, until about next Thursday or Friday, actually, the nation is relatively dry, especially down the south, before that tropical low 03U dissipates across Western Australia and brings a lot of moisture towards next weekend down towards Victoria and New South Wales in the form of thunderstorms, and then that remnant energy combines with the remnants of tropical cyclone, what will be at that point Kirrily, and brings a lot of rainfall towards southeast Queensland, up to 500 millimetres actually, so a devastating amount of rainfall is possible there. Nationwide for temperatures, it's not looking anything out of the ordinary, to be honest. One or two hot spots across the nation's red centre for the next 10 days, but what's new there? It is the Australian summer, of course. Now, as this cyclone moves, or tropical low moves across Western Australia, there will be cool spots actually across parts of the state, especially next Friday and Saturday. Actually, we could be seeing overnight minimum drop below 10 degrees for some locations, so very cold there for their summer. And there'll also be one or two cold spots across Victoria and New South Wales as the remnants of the two cyclones moves through the centre of Australia. We could be seeing some daytime maxima as low as 15 degrees for some locations, up to 10 degrees below average. Taking a look at the satellite imagery, just to end things off here, you can see a lot of convection firing up over the Coral Sea right now. These cyclones are truly forming, or the tropical cyclone in the Coral Sea is truly a forming system right now. And we can also see the tropical low across the Northern Territory spinning itself up quite nicely. But let's get into the forecast details and take a look at what's in store for the Queensland coastline from tropical low 05U. Alright, so taking a look at the satellite picture nationwide, you can see tropical low 03U over the central Northern Territory towards the northwest of Tennant Creek at this time, and the tropical low 05U, the one that we're going to be tracking in depth across the next 15 minutes, towards the southeast of Port Moresby and PNG. This one is the really dangerous storm threat, and you can see it's already starting to fire some really good convection around its centre. These are some very strong thunderstorms towards its centre as well, typical for very strong cyclones that start to form across the Australian region. We've seen this convective pattern before with very powerful tropical cyclones, so very strong thunderstorms mean a very strong cyclone is possible to form, and form rapidly out of these cluster of storms up here. But if we switch it over to the wind forecast, we're going to be taking a look at the Access G3 model first, because it is the Bureau of Meteorology's own forecast model, and we put the pressure and the wind bars on. You can see the cyclone, or the tropical low, actually centered south of the Solomon Islands in the Solomon Sea. Over the next 12 hours, it's really not expected to do much by this evening. It's still wrapping itself up, and it's going to take its sweet time to wrap itself up. We really only start to see the first hints of this becoming a fully fledged tropical cyclone by around Sunday afternoon, actually, when it's got this pressure into the low 990s as it approaches the Coral Sea Islands territory and all the reefs along the Great Barrier Reef. Now, you can already see here it's a pretty menacing picture for Queensland. We've got a developing tropical cyclone in the Coral Sea, and it's looking like it's going to line up the Queensland coastline. I will say this right now, the future for this storm is very uncertain. There's a chance that it could completely miss the Queensland coastline, but it's looking increasingly likely that that option isn't available anymore, and that this cyclone goes straight into a major metro area like Townsville or Mackay or Rockhampton or Airlie Beach or something like that along the Queensland coastline in around 8 to 10 days' time, most likely on Australia Day, actually. That's the consensus that I'm getting with the forecast models. However, there's no point in panicking about this system yet. You can start preparing for this cyclone, like taking some very small preparations, like getting some cyclone supplies ready or making sure your cyclone emergency kits are ready and up to date if you do live along the coastline between Cairns and Rockhampton. But because it is so uncertain with where this cyclone could impact, there is no point in beginning sandbagging or any of the last minute preparations that you take before a tropical cyclone impact. And we will know these details by around Monday or Tuesday, more specifically on where this cyclone is going to be making landfall. But it's a similar forecast to Jasper, where we really don't know where this system is going to make a landfall when it was forming. It was only until a couple of days before it made landfall that we actually knew what the impacts were going to be and how devastating the cyclone was going to be for parts of Cairns and up towards Hopevale and so forth. Now, the reason why I'm not as concerned for this tropical cyclone as I was for Cyclone Jasper's impact was A, because of the uncertainty, but it's also because this cyclone, as it makes landfall, will also be fast moving, which means the only real damages that we're going to see are incredible wind damages, some pretty significant storm surges, and also a lot of rainfall from this cyclone. But we're not going to be seeing 2,000 millimeters of rain. So the fast motion should hamper down that maximum amount of rainfall, which is some good news there. But once again, it is a strong tropical cyclone that's lining up the Queensland coastline, and it's a threatening system to have going for Queensland at this time of the year, as it is with all severe tropical cyclones that line up the Queensland coastline. So make sure you're being prepared and being on top of this system, but not being scared at this point, because it isn't a system that is worth worrying over or losing sleep over right now. Now, as we get into Monday, as you can see playing this run through, keeping track of time on the bottom part of your screen, you can see the cyclone wrapping itself up quite nicely. It's undergoing rapid intensification at this time. As we get into Tuesday, we're likely going to be seeing this cyclone approach Category 3 status as it moves towards the Queensland coastline. Now, it will continue its rapid intensification on Tuesday before sort of having an initial peak actually Tuesday evening at Category 3 status. Might even be a high-end Category 3 tropical cyclone at this time, before it weakens off slightly because of its stalling pattern. And it's only until Wednesday the 24th and into Thursday morning when we start to see strengthening take place again as this cyclone gears up for final approach. Now, until Tuesday or Wednesday, we've got a very good idea on what this cyclone is going to do. It's going to move south from where it is right now, and it will likely stall across parts of the Coral Sea or the Great Barrier Reef What it does after Wednesday is really uncertain, and there's a lot of unknown, and this is just one forecast. There are different forecasts out there, but this is from the Access G3 model. You can see from Wednesday it moves towards the Queensland coastline, strengthening substantially actually, becoming a Category 4 strength tropical cyclone Tuesday evening before it makes its final approach towards what looks to be a Townsville landfall on Friday morning, making landfall on the Townsville metro area, right on the Townsville area at 12 p.m. midday on Friday the 26th, so Australia Day, as what looks to be a Category 3, maybe a low-end Category 4 strength tropical cyclone, the strongest impact since likely Cyclone Marcia of 2015 or Cyclone Debbie of 2017. Again, a lot of variables are there in this tropical cyclone forecast, so I can't be making any calls on what happens. However, this has been a very consistent forecast from the Access G3 model, so I'd be inclined to get my money behind this forecast right now, considering it's been very consistent. It's a very plausible forecast as well, like it's certainly possible that this actually happens, but it is concerning in the sense that this is a major cyclone impact on a major metropolitan area on the Queensland coastline. Very significant indeed. Townsville are built for strong tropical cyclones, mind you, but this one is very, very strong indeed as it moves through Townsville, and you could expect significant wind and storm surge damage from this cyclone. Now, I know a lot of you guys are very worried actually from the Cyclone Jasper situation and how much rainfall we got from that cyclone. Now, there's a lot of rainfall on the northern side of the system as well as per this forecast. I'm not saying that all tropical cyclones bring in tremendous amounts of rainfall ashore. However, because this cyclone is going to be fast moving as it makes landfall, and this is a pretty likely situation from most major forecast models until it makes its turn towards southern Queensland, the cyclone is not likely to dump a lot of rainfall immediately onshore. However, some of the mountains adjacent to the coastline could pick up totals up to 500 millimeters, which could definitely push rivers beyond their moderate to major flood levels. Now, because the cyclone will make a sharp sort of, not a U-turn, but it will make a 90-degree turn at least as it parallels the Queensland coastline, you can see a lot of rainfall could fall there as well, and over the next 10 days, you could be seeing rainfall accumulations as per this forecast approach 500 millimeters for some locations. So still a lot of rainfall, but you're not talking historic 750 to 1,000 millimeter totals over a 1 or 2 day period. You're probably looking at maybe 500 millimeters over a 2 to 3 day period, and in one 24-hour period when the cyclone makes landfall, you might be seeing up to 300 millimeters along some locations. Now, what will also be a concern is the inflow on this system. Now, anywhere between Townsville down towards Proserpine and Mackay, and even for places including Bowen and inland Charters Towers and Ravenswood, there will be places that get the inflow bands of this system and pick up rainfall totals up to 400 or 500 millimeters in 1 or 2 locations. Again, because it will happen over a 3-day period, you're not expecting a flash flooding situation to develop, but certainly a flooding situation is possible, and you could be seeing some rivers be pushed beyond their moderate to major flood alerts from this amount of rainfall, and it only takes one significant shower band to really push rainfall up another 100 or 200 millimeters in a 1 hour period. I mean, this is tropical rainfall that we're talking about, so A, it's very unpredictable, and B, it could be a lot heavier than what the forecast is saying. Now, I feel like we've talked about the Access G3 model forecast for long enough. We're going to take a look at the ECMWF forecast. This is where we get an idea of what actually is likely to happen, considering we can take what forecast we've already seen and combine that and get a good idea of what are consistent factors in the forecast. Now, what's a very consistent factor, as I'm sure you've probably noticed by now, is the storm's intensification. We're likely going to be seeing it rapidly intensify Tuesday and Wednesday and get up towards a Category 3 peak on Wednesday, and then it's going to undergo a stalling pattern before turning towards the Queensland coastline on Thursday, exactly in line with what the Access G3 model has to say, so I can make comment on this and say it is a reliable and plausible forecast because there's good model certainty around it, which means it is more likely than not to happen at this point, which is a concerning situation for Queensland. But as I've said time and time again, there's no point on worrying about it right now. Come back on Sunday or Monday and I'll give you a very good idea on what's very likely to happen from this cyclone, but make sure you're also staying up to date with the Bureau of Meteorology and the official agencies and your shire officers as well, because they'll also have some good and reliable information out there for you to follow. And keep in mind, I don't even live in a cyclone-prone area, so I'm not experienced in preparing for tropical cyclones either, so it's best to rely on professionals that know what they're doing, because they'll give you the best advice, that's for sure. And you can see a Category 4 strength tropical cyclone approaching the Queensland coastline at this time, making a direct landfall on Hamilton Island, just outside of Proserpine, as a storm with a pressure of, 965 millibars possibly. So very comparable in intensity to Cyclone Debbie, and in the exact same location as well. So as per this forecast, I'd be inclined to say that this is just going to be a Debbie version 2 from the Eastern will be a forecast model, but again, things will change. But a lot more model certainty from these two forecast models, these two major forecast models. They're both making a landfall within a couple of 100 kilometres of each other, and both at a very similar intensity as well. And both have a very similar forecast for the cyclone's lifespan as well, which means there's very good certainty between these forecasts, which means it's now becoming more and more possible to give an exact picture on what's going to happen. And I would be expecting a landfall between Cardwell right down towards Rockhampton. That's the most likely location to make for this cyclone to make a landfall, which is a better forecast from yesterday when we were saying somewhere up around Lockhart River, right down towards Bundaberg or Harvey Bay, when we were saying that this cyclone could be making a landfall. So now we've narrowed it down to about a 200 kilometre stretch of coastline where it's more likely than not this tropical cyclone will make a landfall on. And we've also honed in the conditions. We're probably looking at a Category 3 or Category 4 strength tropical cyclone and up to 500 millimetres of rain. So it's really good that we've got that certainty really starting to shine through now, because it gives us the opportunity to make a more reliable forecast. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are also worried about the rainfall in southeastern Queensland. Well, from this tropical cyclone, expect quite a lot. If it does get itself across the scenic rim or the Blue Mountains around the Gold Coast or the Sunshine Coast, expect up to 500 millimetres, again, in a very similar fashion to how Cyclone Debbie dumped her rainfall. Now, the forecast for this cyclone is looking a little bit better, where it actually passes north of Gympie and Harvey Bay around Bundaberg and towards Rockhampton and Gladstone, where this cyclone dumps up to 500 millimetres for those locations as well, but not in places that are already saturated in terms of the amount of rainfall that they've already had. So you're probably not going to be looking at a dire flooding situation up there. But once again, there will be rivers that peak at around their minor to moderate flood alerts, and maybe even one or two that get up towards major flooding alert. As with every tropical cyclone that moves through the Queensland coastline, some degree of flooding is expected from this. And even if this storm hovers just offshore, the inflow bands from this system will dump a lot of rainfall onshore in a lot of locations between Cairns down towards Rockhampton, and we will be seeing some rainfall accumulations regardless of where this cyclone makes landfall, up to 600 or 700 millimetres of rainfall over the next 10 days. So a very substantial amount of rainfall is expected, and it only takes one or two thunderstorm or one or two rain bands to really push the rainfall significantly or substantially higher, and it could add another 25% onto the rain gauges as well. So be watching out for that. And again, all of this will come out in a more detailed forecast a little bit later on, but we just really don't know what's going to happen with this tropical cyclone here. But I would say with pretty good certainty and pretty good confidence that it's most likely going to make a landfall between Cardwell down towards Mackay. At the furthest south, probably Rockhampton, but at this point it's probably going to be between Cardwell and Mackay at this point. It's a cyclone hotspot. They get cyclones every single year, but this one is likely going to be substantially stronger than the majority of tropical cyclones. Now, we'll just briefly touch on the tropical cyclone that's moving through Western Australia as well, where it's going to be a tropical low at that point. It's the tropical low 03U located over the Northern Territory. Now, rainfall accumulations are starting to ease off, but there will be places that pick up a further 400 to 500 millimetres from this cyclone. And in fact, it looks like around the Fitzroy River catchment, you could be seeing one or two spots pick up to 800 millimetres over the next 10 days from the remnants of that tropical low as it moves north of Fitzroy Crossing, south of Broome, and then into the mining communities around Marble Bar, Tom Price and Newman, where we will be seeing rainfall accumulation there up to 500 millimetres before the storm moves inland into Western Australia and saturates the desert communities there, which is good because they do need a little bit of rainfall in the centre of Western Australia, and 50 to 100 millimetres would be great for dams, and also would be great for some rivers that are lacking on a bit of rainfall at this time. But apart from that, nationwide it's looking fairly average and fairly stock standard. The east coast of Australia just getting those evening thunderstorm patterns that you typically see this time of the year. Central Australia, one or two thunderstorms. The only one or two wet spots is actually from the tropical low 03U, and the only real standout feature that I'm seeing on this forecast is, of course, the tropical cyclone moving towards the Queensland coastline. That's the only feature that's really got my eye here. But apart from that, it's just going to be that hot summer pattern where we get the hot temperatures during the day across Central Australia, and then those thunderstorms firing up towards the north and the east. So nothing too far out of the ordinary, which is some good news indeed. However, it does look like we'll get a bit of a hot spell towards parts of New South Wales as this cyclone moves through. As you'd expect with a tropical cyclone, the subtropics tend to heat up quite a lot, and places in northern New South Wales could be picking up daytime maxima approaching 48 or 49 degrees Celsius, which would push close to record temperatures for January. But again, Central Australia, very typical for summer, where you get 1 or 2 days where the temperature approaches 47, 48 or 49. And again, this is quite a long way out as well, so I've got pretty low confidence in saying that this is a likely forecast to actually occur. But anyway, that's about it for the Australian weather for the next 10 days. I do hope you enjoyed the video. We're pushing close to 15,000 subscribers here, so please do consider subscribing. It really does help us out, and I thank you so much for doing so in advance, and thank you so much for the lovely comments as well. I'm reading all of them. I'm trying to reply to a lot of them, but they really are quite heartwarming, so thank you so much, and I'm really honoured to be providing this service. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next storm. Goodbye.
Thank you for watching our content this update. If you enjoyed it, be sure to subscribe to get more updates covering all things weather and geophysics impacting Australia and the Oceania region. Subscribe to our other channels for more content from across the network, and be sure to check out our website where you can find free access to floater and radar imagery and articles on everything weather and much more. If you wish to support us directly, you can purchase some of our merchandise. We have a wide variety of clothing and homeware. Or you could become an Ultimate Fan, which is the best way to directly support us, granting you some sweet perks and offers, including features in our custom storm animations, live streams, and much more.